have a conversation. This is good. Okay, let's try this one more time. 5, 4, 3.
The Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, episode 824 for Monday, July 13th, 2020.
And welcome to the Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, the show where you send in all your tips, questions, cool stuff found. We take them, we mix them all together, we massage them into an agenda, we categorize things. We flow through that agenda with the goal being, even with the tangents, because the tangents can serve the goal that is being each of us learns at least 5 new things every single time we get together. Sponsors for this episode include burrow.com/MGG, a new one, barebones.com, and mac.cachefly.com. So we will talk about all of those shortly here for you. For now, here in Durham, New Hampshire, I'm Dave Hamilton.
And here in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is John F. Braun.
That is John F. Braun. How you doing today?
Yeah, hanging.
Hanging. All right. Well, let's see if we can jazz that up with some knowledge. We'll start with some quick tips from Ben. He says, when I updated VLC today, the update process included an app verification moment that incidentally ran twice instead of once, resulting in a window left on my screen that just was floating there. And if I clicked the little red X, no effect. He said, so I started with Activity Monitor to try and identify the wayward process, but it wasn't under security, even though the window carries the security and privacy icon. I also thought maybe looking for the highest process ID number in Activity Monitor, because it adds, it increments the number when new things are launched, would help. He said, but no, that actually takes a while given the number of apps and processes running on my Mac. He says, so I pushed on and happened to minimize the window, an action I rarely take under any circumstance. He says, I much prefer to use spaces and app hiding. Fair. He says, lo and behold, doing so revealed the window's name, which was Core Services UI Agent, which also is the name of its parent process. Using Activity Monitor to quit this process caused the window to disappear. So when you've got one of those floating windows, if you minimize it, then you float over it, that will show you the name of the process that it's running as. And of course, there you go. I like this tip. This is good. I've been in that scenario before.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. I was pretty stoked about this one. So thanks, Ben. That's good. That's good. Any thoughts on that, John, before we move on to Paul?
Nope.
All right.
Try it.
Paul says, if you purchase a song from iTunes and then later delete that song, the song itself is not deleted. It is only hidden. On your computer, go into Apple Music or iTunes, the app, go into Accounts, View My Account. In the iTunes in the Cloud section, click on the Manage link on the Hidden Purchases line. Find the album or song that you want to unhide and simply click the Unhide button. Thanks, Paul. That's pretty good. I had no idea. I mean, I knew you could get them back, but I didn't realize that that was there. That's pretty good. Huh. Go figure. Thoughts on that one before we move on, Mr. Braun?
No, I don't have any music in the cloud.
You don't use iTunes Match or
No.
iCloud Music Library in any way? No. Oh, okay.
No.
All right. That's okay. I mean, if you don't need it, you don't need it. All right, one last quick tip before we go into some cool stuff found, and this one's from listener Giles, who this is probably a quick tip reprise, although I'm not sure if we've called it a quick tip before. He says, I use an iPhone 10 and I really like the Force Touch function. I find this especially useful when trying to print or export a web page or create a PDF, where I press the print action via the square box with the vertical line at the bottom of the screen edge on Safari. He says, I generally don't print, but I often need to export as a PDF. On iPad Pro, this was an issue because there is no Force Touch. Well, there's also no Force Touch on the iPhone's 11. And he says, and the create PDF using shortcut workflow is unreliable in my experience. He says, but I found a workaround. If you pinch zoom on the print pane, a new window appears, which means you can save as PDF or export to the Files app as a PDF, etc. For me, this is very handy. He says, I hope everyone else finds it useful too. Thanks, Giles. Yeah, that's absolutely right. You can get that print preview up and then just pinch zoom on it. And boom, now you get a window that you can export as a PDF or, do whatever you want with. And that's the way to do it on an iPhone 11 or an iPad, as you pointed out. So it's pretty good. Good, yeah?
Yeah, good to know what I'll be missing once I upgrade. If I upgrade.
That's right. Hey, I guess the SE doesn't have Force Touch either, although it might.
No, I'm still in the 8.
I know, but the 8, the SE has a lot of the same 8 hardware. I got to check. Yeah, that's interesting. It might very well have it. So, all right. Yeah. Shall we go to cool stuff found here, my friend?
Indeed.
Okay. Cool. Jeremy brings us back to the ice conversation. He says, you've been talking about ice. Ice, baby. And I wanted to point out a company that sells products and a service for this. It isn't as techy as customizing your home screen, he says, but they do have a product that is specific for Apple Watch, and it's a company called RoadID.com. And it's a little band that goes around your watch band, and you have engraved on it all of the various contact information that you might want in case of an emergency. And, of course, you can put if you have some allergies or anything like that on there as well. So I like that. It's a pretty cool little thing. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, of course. Ice, maybe? I don't know. Okay. Thoughts on that before we go to Greg?
Yeah, it's like a Medi alert.
Yeah, right. It's like it ties it all in together. Exactly. Yep. Greg, while we stay on the Apple Watch here, points out, he says, I'm sure you guys know this. Maybe. The answer was no, at least for me. He says, I just opened the calculator app on my Apple Watch for the first time, and because I always just use the one on my phone. He says, I immediately noticed that the Apple Watch calculator app has a tip calculator, and I was surprised. You just tap the tip button, and you can also split the tip, too. He says, who knew? Probably everyone but me. Well, possibly everyone but us, Greg. I did not know that this was there. So because I always try to calculate the tip in my head, or I wind up using my son's workflow that calculates the tip so that the grand total ends in a palindromic number, and because I like palindromic numbers. And so anyway, I had never looked, so I didn't know. That's pretty good. Handy stuff.
Yeah, I think they demonstrated it in a recent event. Maybe not the most recent. Maybe the one before that.
You're probably
right.
That
caught my attention.
Yeah,
because I was like, hey, Dave's son did something like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because that workflow of his runs on the watch too. So, yeah. All right. And I was messing around with that iPhone SE where I have the developer preview of iOS 14 on it, and I noticed a screen that allows me to tell the phone to use a private randomized MAC address for its Wi-Fi connection. And you can do it per network. So, for example, if you're at home or at work and you want your phone's actual MAC address to be displayed or to be shared with the DHCP server so that you get your actual reserved address or whatever it is, that's totally fine. You just turn it off. But otherwise, it randomizes it so that people can't track you. People have no idea because it's just a new one, and it comes from a pool that are registered, because I looked at what it was, and then I looked it up in some MAC address lookup database, and it comes up as this is a randomized, this is a pool for randomized MAC addresses. Don't rely on this, which I thought was pretty good. Those Apple people, they're always looking out for privacy, and I'm not against that. So, right?
Yeah, though I would think it would I don't know, cause problems, if anything, because as you pointed out, a lot of things are linked to the MAC address. But yeah.
But like not my phone. Like even here at the house, I don't put our phones on reservations. I mean, I'm never going to target them as like servers or anything like that. So it's not like I've never found a need to put that on my, to target my phone with a MAC address reservation. I do it with my laptop and my. Do you target your phones with reservations? Huh? Right.
Yeah. No, I give them all a known IP address just in case I want to. Though, yeah, as you point out, there's not many cases where one would need to get something on.
Right.
Running on the phone. It's not like it's running a server or anything like that. But
yeah.
Nice find.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But like I said, so like for your home network, you just turn that off and say don't randomize it, and then you'd get your MAC address would be, or it would share the right MAC address and the same one every time, and I thought that was pretty good.
So wait, is this in Mac OS?
I have not looked for it in Mac OS, but it is definitely in iOS 14 and iPad OS 14, and I believe also in Watch OS. So. But I don't know
actually,
that it's
now that I
OS.
think about it, I think you can use ifconfig, to change your MAC address.
Yes.
If you type the right thing.
That's correct. Yeah, that's always been a part of the the Unix that's built into your Mac and presumably of iOS. Yeah, that's right. You could always have done it. It's pretty trivial. Most network stacks allow you to change your MAC address. This is just sort of automating it for you. Yeah, and Brian Monroe in the chat at live.macgeekgab.com points out that it could cause issues with public like Wi-Fi hotspots, because once you go through the bonus screen to authenticate with it, they put that in their database so that they don't show you the bonus screen anymore. Well, if your MAC address changes, but I don't think it changes until you reconnect. So for the duration of any given connection, and maybe even longer than that, like maybe for that Wi-Fi network, it's good for a few hours or something like that. But that would be an interesting thing to test. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And Dogster in the chat points out that it is not on Big Sur yet, at least. So it's not a thing for the Mac yet, and may not ever be, or at least not for Big Sur. So thank you, everybody. Okay, fun. This is what we enjoy here. We have in the tips section, we have some follow-ups here, and I've got one from Matt. And we'll let Matt take it away, I think.
Hey, Dave and John, and maybe Pilot Pete. This is Matt calling from Chapel Hill. Wanted to let you all know that I've been getting caught for more than 4 years and didn't even know it. I had and still have a domain registered with GoDaddy, which is for private. Back in the day when changing ISPs meant changing emails, and I was sick of that. It predated Gmail. So GoDaddy used to host webmail, which now they're for free, which now they're charging for. That changed over, and I lost a bit of emails at the end of 2019. But anyway, figured out a way how I could forward, as I think you've detailed in the show, through just the domain forwarding service, free forwarding service from GoDaddy to my Gmail account.
Yep.
And all was well. And using the Gmail client, probably about 2 weeks ago, I noticed a little red broken padlock underneath the address bar. And apparently when I clicked on and looked, turns out that GoDaddy forwarding service was forwarding these emails that had come into it encrypted through TLS, but it was sending it in the clear. They do not forward along with any TLS encryption or SSL. So I had to do a little bit of learning and digging. My stomach dropped because 4 years ago, actually, probably now 10 years ago, I've been using Gmail as a forwarding service, kind of cloud backup for my Mac emails. So that anything that came into my domain, I both downloaded onto my computer and then had automatically forwarded to Gmail so I could do searches and stuff like that and just have it as a backup. And I had never looked. Sure enough, for 4 years, when I used the Gmail client, there's a broken lock on all the forwarded emails coming from my domain. So this is shocking, but I wanted to clear that up as best I could. So I have found a free workaround, and that's to suggest to you that forwardemail.net is a free open source project, and they walk you through the process of going into your domain. So anybody that has a domain with GoDaddy and might be forwarding anything to Gmail, just so you're aware, or anywhere, it will be unencrypted. So you can use forwardemail.net. It will, in an encrypted format, forward it along to any of a variety of different ways in which you could parse your emails. You have to change some settings, specifically something called the MX and the TXT settings. This is something new to me. But
yeah, no, okay. All right. So yes, forwardemail.net will walk you through how to migrate your domain to them so that it can then be the forwarder instead of GoDaddy being the forwarder. And that's great. And we'll put a link to forwardemail.net in the show notes, although you probably remember it by now. As far as the core problem, I want to make sure we address what the issue is, because most email is not encrypted in terms of, like, when I send John an email, unless I go out of my way to use GPG or SMIME or something like that, the email is not encrypted in a way that only you could read it. Anyone that has access to your email account could read that. What he's talking about here, what Matt's talking about, is the scenario where when mail is transferred from one mail server to another. So let's say that John was sending me email, but I was being forwarded by GoDaddy, right? So I was hosting my mail domain with GoDaddy. So John sends me an email. His mail server connects to GoDaddy's mail server, which then says, we forward this. So that then connects to whatever I'm hosting my mail at, let's say Gmail. And then that finally, lands in my box. The connections between those mail servers nowadays, and for many years, can be encrypted with TLS, so that when each server hands the message to the next one, the data path is encrypted. Someone sniffing the path of data would just get an encrypted blob and nothing valuable. What he's pointing out is that, again, in this example, John sends an email, his mail server encrypts the connection to GoDaddy, but then GoDaddy does not encrypt the connection on the outbound, because that's just not how their email forwarder is set up. Forwardemail.net does encrypt both inbound and outbound connections. So it's similar to like when you connect to your bank, right? What you're seeing on the screen is not encrypted, right? Anybody that's looking over your shoulder can also see that, but people that are sniffing the connection in transit just see the encrypted part. That's what we're talking about here. And I've never really worried about this, because I guess I'm so used to the concept of email being not encrypted, right? I mean, it wasn't. No part of it was encrypted in the, originally. So I've just always sort of treated email as this thing in the clear. And anytime I've sent a credit card number or whatever via email, which I don't do often, but I'm sure I have done over time, just out of convenience, I'm always sort of aware that, this is a little bit safer than writing it on a card and posting it on a shop window downtown. But because, it's not there for easy access to passersby, but somebody that wants to sniff that stuff certainly could. So this is, it's something to be aware of. And if it bothers you, then we have a solution. And if it doesn't bother you, that's okay. But it's good to be aware, I think. So what do you think about this, John?
Yeah, I think usually most, if not all, I think of my connections are encrypted in some way, and they're typically on a different port.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, the encrypted connections are either 587 or or
right. Yeah, I knew it was like 5 something. So normally it's normally I think
maybe I don't know.
Yeah, so normally I think it's 25, right?
Well, yeah, 25 is for yes, 25 is the default port for SMTP for inbound mail, but for outbound mail, it no longer is.
Oh,
right. Yeah, they changed that so that you could split things and do this kind of encryption and block stuff out, and yeah, it just made life a little easier. But yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. 445 and 587 is what we're hearing in the chat room there. And if you want to watch us while we record and provide real-time feedback, we really appreciate that. live.macgeekgab.com. Plus, it's fun. You get to chat with the community, and there's all kinds of things going on in the chat room that we don't surface to the show, and it's great. Like, community is awesome. All right, a couple more tips here, John. The next one from Todd, who says, last week in 823, when we were talking about contacts and smart groups and things like that, he said, I had the same problem with edit distribution list a few OS versions ago. He says, I got the same blank screen on my Mac in contacts that you did. He says, I worked my way up in Apple support on this, and they were supposed to email me back, but I never heard back. He says, one solution I did find was removing all the accounts in the Contacts app except for iCloud. Then Edit Distribution List worked as expected and kept all of the changes I made, even when I added the other contact accounts back. He says, just a hint for listeners that are using older OS versions where this isn't fixed. And I was definitely in that boat. I have my Gmail contacts also synced in my address book. So I'm sure that was because it was just a user interface problem. It wasn't like a functionality problem. It would do it. You just couldn't see it do it, which was the frustrating part. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that, somebody just didn't code around like what happens when there's this extra thing there. So I don't know. What do you think, Mr. Braun?
It's confusing.
It's confusing. It is. Yeah, it's good. We have a couple more things. And I want to get to, especially this one about Touch Bar MacBook Pros that you've got queued up here, John. But the next thing that I want to do is I want to talk about our sponsors for today, if that works for you, my friend, Mr. Braun.
Absolutely.
All right. Our first sponsor today is a new sponsor at burrow.com/MGG. When I buy a couch, I want to have some control over the design, right? And usually that means you got to go to a showroom and just check each model. Oh, does that have the things I want? Is it comfortable? But does it have the things I want? And is it comfortable? But does it, and it's this constant thing. Oh, and is it the color I want? But does it have the things I want? And is it comfortable? You're doing this circular thing, and it's such a process. Wouldn't it be better if you could go online and go through over 23,000 different permutations of the perfect sofa so that you can customize your own perfect sofa? Yes, it would. And that's what Burrow is doing. And even for us geeks, Burrow's sofas include built-in USB chargers so that your phone doesn't die while you lounge, right? Everything's made of durable fabric or leather, and the fabric is naturally scratch and stain resistant. And like I said, you can just customize everything: fabric color, leg finish, armrest style, length. Right, length. You can even add a chaise lounge or an ottoman or both. Like you just mix and match and fit what fits in your room, your life, your body, everything. You figure it out, and you can assemble your sofa or break it down in minutes, and you don't need any tools. And if your seating needs change, you can add or remove seats as needed. Convert a love seat into a sofa, into a sectional and back, right? Shopping easily. Right there on your computer, you just kind of tweak and get it just right, and then they ship it to you because the folks that started Burrow, I think it was a class project somewhere, right? They just wanted to fix this problem, and so they fixed it. And you always get fast and free shipping and zero interest financing. Go to burrow.com/MGG and you get a little bit more because you get $75 off your purchase. Again, plus that fast and free shipping. You got to see the site for details. That's burrow.com/MGG for $75 off. Our thanks to Burrow for sponsoring this episode. Our next sponsor is one of my favorite pieces of software, and that's BBEdit 13.1 from barebones.com. Yep. Just last month, they dropped the new BBEdit 13.1, which brings back HTML tidy and introduces a completely overhauled preview feature. Also adds a new run Unix command. Think about that, right? It's called run Unix command, but it is in itself a command. Very meta. And it expands the whole array of supported Markdown variants. This run Unix command thing is awesome because it provides a quick means to directly run one-off Unix commands for processing text within BBEdit. And also, like I said, the preview engine in BBEdit. This is one of the coolest things, right? Because you can write all your code, and then you want to, if you're doing HTML, you want to see what it's going to look like. Well, that's what the new preview thing is really working for. It's faster, it's smoother, it's more complete. Like, yeah, I know I get crazy and excited about a text editor, but that's BBEdit's fault. And you need to experience that for yourself. So go to barebones.com, download your 30-day free trial, right? And then decide which of the features you need to keep, right? Because it's got that grep playgrounds, the regex playgrounds. Well, now that Numbers 10.1 from Apple supports regex, you want a place where you can go play so that you know how to use that stuff when you're over on the other side, right? So this is like its own little tool within this bigger tool. Again, very meta. So go check it out, barebones.com, download your 30-day free trial. Depending on what features you need, it might just remain free for you forever. And if you need some of those other features, well, then you pay for it because that's how that works. Our thanks to Barebones for making BBEdit and for sponsoring this episode. Next up for today is CacheFly at mac.cachefly.com. Yes, CacheFly are the folks who provide the bandwidth to get Mac Geek Gab from us to you, but they do more than that. They have your back for your website, for your business, because with their new web optimization capabilities, all of your website's content will be optimized before it's delivered to your visitors without requiring any development effort for you. And this matters, right? Because for each second a page takes to load, it costs a company 16% in engagement. Fewer visits mean fewer customers. That's not good. And so the same people that have been helping us for years can help you. Their web optimization solution at CacheFly includes powerful APIs for solving all those content distribution problems. They'll do your on-the-fly next-gen image optimization for you. You don't need to think about it. They'll do all your load balancing and smart asset delivery. And if your website's tied to your revenue, this stuff's important. And the good people at CacheFly are even going to provide a free optimization consultation for listeners of this podcast. That's right, just for you. Know exactly where your site stands today with a Lighthouse score report and learn how CacheFly's web optimization solution can help add 60 points instantly to your score. All you have to do is visit mac.cachefly.com. That's mac.cachefly.com. Our thanks to CacheFly for sponsoring this episode.
All right, Dave. This is kind of a follow-up from Jin.
Okay.
And here's his question. He had two questions. And so I took this one because we really didn't answer it in a prior episode. So, and yeah, what was observed in a prior episode is that on the touch bar Mac with Touch ID, like the one that I have, you can't get the dialog that says sleep, restart, shutdown by holding down the power key. It's just not available.
Right.
And here's a nasty thing. They even say this in a support article. So I found this. And so here's Apple's answer. Unlike with older Mac notebooks, holding down Touch ID on your MacBook Pro or MacBook Air doesn't display a dialog with options to sleep, restart, or shutdown. Okay. You can find these options in the Apple menu. It's like, well,
thanks.
Well, yeah, thanks for not doing that. So as we pointed out in the last episode, you can get some of this functionality, but I wanted to close the loop here because it wasn't really an answer. So the thing is, you can add a sleep, and also I found there's another one that's pretty handy. So it's actually more. So if you go to System Preferences, Keyboard, Customize Control Strip, you can drag a sleep and a lock screen option to the touch bar. So you get some stuff. But then how do you get the other dialogues? Well, I found an article that told me how to do that, Dave. So you go in kind of the same place. So you go to System Preferences, Keyboard, Shortcuts, App Shortcuts. And what you do is you add 2 entries, and they use the same wording. So and I confirmed that this works fine. So I added one called Restart ... and one called Shutdown ... But what I did is I mapped them to a function key. So I mapped it to function F10 and F12 because function 11 does something else.
Sure. Oh, that's really
and
smart.
So when you hold down the function key, the touch bar gives you, all the function keys. And it works exactly as you would expect. So if I hold down function F10, it says, hey, you want to restart? And F12, I map to shutdown. So that's how you get all of these options, plus the lock screen one, which is kind of handy and you should always do when you leave your computer sitting there.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, not if you're, socially distanced, but if you are, then, or if somebody else can come around when you're when you're not there. Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in the day when I did the corporate thing, and actually for a short while, I actually worked for a place that did DoD projects.
Yeah.
And the sysadmin, one of them that I knew, they would actually look at your terminal. And if you were idle for a certain amount of time, they would come. And if you weren't there, you'd get like a nastygram. Like,
oh, nice.
This is a security violation.
Yeah.
So they were real serious about, bad people getting access to
absolutely
data. But you're right. Yeah, if you're at home.
Yeah, it's not quite as important, but yeah, like it is a thing to be aware of. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. All right, cool. Excellent. Let's we've got some what I call general questions, the things that make life interesting for us all here. So let's go to listener John, who says, I recently purchased a new car, Lincoln Nautilus, with Apple's CarPlay. And he says, I have 2 questions. The first is, there are a limited number of apps that CarPlay supports. Is there a way to add other apps that are not CarPlay, at least out of the gate? He says, one app I use is called iExit. And when traveling the interstates, this app provides information about restaurants, gas stations, etc. When you are approaching along with the exits within distance. And he says, is there a workaround so this app can be displayed with CarPlay? And secondly, he says, I use Google Maps for driving directions. Google Maps has an icon where I can report crashes and slowdowns and speed traps and those sorts of things. Google Maps then displays this on the map. Apple CarPlay does not show this icon. Is there a setting where this icon can be displayed on CarPlay? And then he says third, and finally, CarPlay randomly disconnects for me while driving. I get the message the iPhone is not connected and needs to be connected through USB. Unplugging and replugging does not solve the problem. After restarting my phone a few times or turning the car off and on, that solves the problem. I'm wondering if anybody else has had that. So I'm going to answer these in order, John. We can talk through them. The first about CarPlay and adding apps to CarPlay, you and I don't get to do that. That's up to developers. They build screens for CarPlay, and then they flag that their app is CarPlay capable, and then CarPlay will pull those screens. Because CarPlay is essentially just an external touchscreen monitor for your iPhone. And so when you're in CarPlay mode, it's the app is all running on your phone. So for an app that doesn't support CarPlay, for you to say, I want that on CarPlay, the app does not have a screen built to do that, so it would not know what to display. So that's a no-go, unfortunately. But write to your, the developer of your iExit app and any other app you want and see if they'll do it. Now, the same concept will help answer our second question, which is that Google builds the screen for CarPlay, and for Maps, they didn't add that in. So you won't get that option. However, Waze is also a Google product now, and it does have all of that stuff in it. So maybe that's why they sort of chose to not include that in the Google version, the Google Maps version. But if you want that functionality, you can use Waze, and they've built that into those screens. I'm not a big fan of gamifying my driving. I figure if you want to do that, get a car with a stick shift, and at least then you're still focused on the road. But I don't know. I guess it's handy. Any thoughts on this before we talk about his CarPlay troubles?
No, I just remember your reaction to Waze when you were driving with me, and
I was passengering with you. Yeah, don't fiddle with that. What are you doing?
While you're driving. Yeah, I think they accept hand motions as a way to get something to happen, or just speech recognition. I should try them. It wasn't successful first time around with that. So
yeah, and CarPlay doesn't support hand gestures. You have to touch it because there's no camera with CarPlay. But yeah. All right. Now, as far as this randomly disconnect thing, I got you because I've been here before. My Subaru Outback what year is it now? I think that was a 2018. Is a 2018. When I first got it, I was having exactly this problem. And so I went crazy troubleshooting it because, obsessed. And I tried different cables. And once it happened, unplugging and replugging even a known working cable would not bring it back most of the time. Of course, sometimes it would, and that frustrates things even more because, we like consistency when we're troubleshooting. But I tried it with not only different cables, but with different iPhones. So I narrowed it down to the car being the issue. And my car has 2 USB ports that both will feed the CarPlay engine of the head unit, and neither one of those works. So different cables, different phones, definitely this is a problem in the car. And so then I started reading for me. It was the Subaru forums. Harman Kardon makes the head unit, and there have been some problems with this. The long story short was that I wound up getting the head unit replaced, and that it has mostly been fine. I want to say maybe I've seen this problem once or twice since then, but not consistently. And it would happen when I was using Overcast to play a podcast maybe, and Waze to do my directions, and then a call would come in, and then that was the end of it. It would sort of cascade into this scenario where that was done. I did find something out, and I think this is unique to the Harman Kardon head units. So it may be, you may have a very similar head unit in that Lincoln Nautilus. I don't know. But certainly in the Subarus with these CarPlay head units, hold the power button for the head unit in. Normally you just tap it to toggle the power on and off. Hold it in. That will reboot the head unit. You'll see the logo come up, and that's when you can take your hand off the button. But that's way better than having to reboot the entire car just to reboot the head unit, because while you're driving, rebooting the car is a tricky scenario, and it safely involves pulling over and turning the car off. I suppose there are other ways to do it, but I wouldn't really condone any of that silliness while you're rolling 70 miles an hour. Let's just shut the car off. It's fine. Put it in neutral. No problem. I wouldn't do that. Please don't do that. I did not tell you to do that. I never did that. So just hold the button in. It should restart the head unit. What, you have?
Oh, we had, I remember when I took driver's ed, we actually had, one of the lessons. It was, I think, the favorite of everybody, and it was called Emergency Procedures. And one of them was simulating what would happen if your engine died. And what would happen is the instructor would reach over and basically turn the car off and see how you handled it.
Yeah, but
pretty terrifying.
That is terrifying. Yeah. I was up in an airplane once. I was not flying it. It was a small little 4-seater. My brother was taking a flying lesson. I was in the back. There was this old guy who they joked in the flight office that he had soloed Orville. They're like, you'll be fine with him. So we're up at 3,000 feet. We're cruising along. And my brother asked Lloyd, he asked him two questions. The first was, he's like, what's the range on this plane? And Lloyd, without missing a beat, retorted, what's the range on your bladder? And so that ended that conversation. And then he asked Lloyd, he says, so what would happen if, the engine cut out? What would we do? And again, without missing a beat, Lloyd just leans over and kills the engine. I'd never known a CFI to do that before. I knew that they would throttle you down so that you could feel, but restarting an engine is not a guarantee. And, it's not like you can just pull over and check under the hood to see what your problem is when you're at 3,000 feet going, 120 knots. But Lloyd pointed out the plane is just a glider at this point. You're fine. He's like, you've got 3 runways. Pick your favorite, radio to the tower that you have an emergency, and go land. And then, we had that conversation, and finally I tapped Lloyd on the shoulder and said, can we turn the engine back on now? we got the point. We're good. So he did. He turned it back on. It wasn't the most comfortable thing. So
nice.
Yeah. Where were we? You going to take us to Rand? You going to save it? There is one follow-up. I believe listener John is in our chat room at live.macgeekgab.com and says he's now using an Apple-provided cable and has been having better luck. Absolutely. You want to make sure you use MFI certified cables, the made for iPhone, made for iOS. I forget what they've renamed it to, but you want a cable that is certified, whether it's Apple's or someone else's, really doesn't matter. It may matter when you're talking to your dealer because they know Apple cable more reliable. So tell them you're using an Apple cable, but make sure you are using an MFI certified cable, if not from Apple. I found some for the car that have they're coiled, so they retract sort of automatically, and I've found that really handy for CarPlay, so I don't have cables just strewn about, and I don't have wireless CarPlay. So there you go. Thank you. Good, fun. You want to take us to Rand, John, or unless you got more on the CarPlay thing?
No, we're good. All right, Rand's got a head scratcher, but I have run into this. So Rand says, I had only about 25 gigs left on my 1 terabyte SSD. Wow. So I looked for places to reclaim storage space. So I moved about 200 gigs of downloads and stale documents, but did not get any space freed up, despite filling an external drive with 200 gigabytes of old stuff.
Sure.
Does the purgeable space mean anything in this situation? You have probably talked about this, but I cannot find anything in your recent notes. I think we kind of talked about this when we had when we were talking APFS.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we did. We sort of touched on this. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and one observation was that the something about the amount of free space isn't necessarily accurate all the time. But it also may not get freed all the time, which has been my experience. So I ran into something similar, is that I was moving around some large virtual machine files, on the order of, I think, tens of gigs or not the same size as what he's moving around, but
still.
But yeah, I ran into the same thing, is that I would, I wanted to toss one. And so I tossed it, and then I looked and I'm like, well, where's all my free space? It still showed the old amount of free space. The only thing that I found that helped Dave was that I would go into recovery, run disutility, and then do a first aid. And for whatever reason with APFS, that operation freed up the space. It gave the disk whatever it needed to do to free things up. Now, here's the other thing that I've noticed. One time when I was doing this, Dave,
yes.
I looked in my process list, and there was one process that was chugging along. Delete D, which anything with a D at the end is daemon, however you want to pronounce it.
Sure.
But it's background process. And I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. Let's look that up. And that apparently is the process that takes care of this.
Interesting.
And that when you delete something, it eventually gets around to it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Something's got to do it. Yeah. Huh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'll buy that. I wonder if running disk first aid. So first of all, this would have eventually sorted itself out. It sounds like it just takes.
Yes,
it's an asynchronous process that it doesn't free it up.
When I was doing this and Rand was doing this, I mean, I want instant gratification. I want to see that space show up immediately.
No, I've seen this too, especially if my goal is to free up space and not just deleting files. I'm with you. Okay, so it would happen. I wonder if you needed to go into recovery mode, because you can run disk first aid, at least in verify only mode, just from your boot disk, right? I think you can do that still with APFS. I'm not going to try it while we're doing a show, but
no. Oh no, definitely not.
Yeah. I mean, it will slow down your disk access. So I mean, maybe that would be enough.
It could. Yeah. And I think the response was yes. This did give it the nudge. So
that's good.
So I think it's just an APFS thing.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. They want to give you, they don't want to hold your user interface hostage just to do that. So yeah, it makes sense. Give you control back, and we'll take care of this other thing in the background here. So yeah, interesting. It's fascinating what's going on here with all the file system stuff. I like it. It's just keeps it interesting. All right. This might be a geek challenge, John. I'm not sure it's doable, but you never know. Maybe there's some other way. Bruce writes, do you know of any way that a single Mac can be set up in the Messages app to receive messages from more than one iCloud account? Perhaps family sharing, he says, or something. So what he wants to have two iMessage accounts readable on the same Mac. And the only way I can think to do that is to set up, there's two ways, right? One is to set up multiple user accounts, but then you've got to switch user accounts. I mean, you could use fast user switching and log each of them into their own separate iCloud account. But I looked in Messages. I didn't see a way of saying, hey, just throw another iCloud account in here. Didn't seem to work. The other option would be to set up a virtualized container running a separate macOS installation and log that in. It seems that's a little overkill too, to just have another copy of Messages running. But I think those are the only options. So I don't know. What do you think, John?
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of overkill, but yeah, I don't think they have the ability to do that.
Just say, show me other iMessage accounts. Yeah, I know. I like the question though. It's good. If anybody has any thoughts, please feedback at macgeekgab.com. We'd love to hear them.
Did you say feedback at macgeekgab.com?
John, I did. I said feedback at macgeekgab.com. I'm looking here in the chat room to see if anybody in Dogster says the closest would be the workaround of using multiple email addresses with a single iMessage account. Right, that's true. But it's not designed to support separate iMessage accounts. So he is right that one iMessage account can have, you'll have a phone number attached to it usually, and then you can have many email addresses, including like non-iCloud email addresses. And that's a handy thing to put in there. I found it, if I put sort of the addresses that people know how to email me at, adding them to that iCloud account actually makes life a little bit easier. If somebody iMessages me, it all comes in and works. But yeah, interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what you folks come up with. We would love to hear about it. Charles, John, you want to take us to what he's got going on?
Yeah, all sorts of disk action here. All right, hold on.
I'll hold.
Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, this is going back. What do you think of the following screenshot? In my decades of using Macs, starting with the Mac SE and disk swapping heaven, I've never seen this dialogue/warning. Running low on SSD memory is pretty common for me, but application memory? This is on a 2012 MacBook Air using the most recent version of Catalina, and he has 8 gigs of memory and a 256 gig SSD with 23 gigs free.
Just so everybody knows, because they can't see the screenshot you're seeing, John, he has a screen that's come up offering to force quit applications with the warning being your system has run out of application memory. To avoid problems with your computer, quit any applications you are not using. So it's like you need to quit some apps. And I've seen this dialogue, not often, but once or twice. So please carry on.
Yeah. Though you should never see this dialogue because Unix is supposed to manage memory, whether it be your wired memory or, going out to swap. And I think that's what happened here, Dave. And then the app that it showed, I don't think it's a coincidence. So it showed the apps that were running and TextEdit is listed, Dave, and it was taking 21 gigs of memory. Oh. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence, Dave, that number seems to be very close to the amount of disk space he has free. So I wonder if it was filling up, if it was going to swap.
Yeah, okay.
Right? It just seems weird that those 20-something gig are close. And then he has a question, where would TextEdit have gotten started and what app do I use to see if this recurs? Why did it gobble up so much app memory that my system wouldn't app swap? Would System Profiler or System Monitor have shown me anything? I'm assuming I could have gotten it running. Any thoughts? Yeah, I got some thoughts here.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is what's called a memory leak, Dave, I think, where an application, for whatever reason, doesn't release memory, or it keeps gobbling up memory, and this is what you see when that happens. Unfortunately, when you get into this state, it may be hard to get back to normal. But I don't know why TextEdit got launched, or if you can tell what launched it. Maybe going through a console log. But there is something, Dave, and it's been updated, called Swift Default Apps. And that you may want to see what, this shows all the different mappings, like document type to application. Yeah. So you could see what apps are set to launch TextEdit, because it sounds like you didn't intentionally launch it, is that it got launched because you opened a certain document. So maybe the mapping is off there. Yeah. As far as a way to tell when this is happening, you could have Activity Monitor running in the background, but I think the best way, Dave, would be to use an iStat menus notification. So you may not know this, but in addition to showing you all sorts of interesting information, iStat menus can also tell you when certain terrible things are happening, or usually terrible. And I looked, and so what they have under the memory category, Dave, is you can set a notification if either memory pressure or free memory get to a certain state. So,
right.
So either, peek, up in the menu bar every now and then, or do one of these notifications in iStat menus. I'm not aware of how to do this with the system itself. I mean, maybe you could run a automator or Apple script that would check.
Maybe iStat menus would be I love those little things, because I have my Mac notify me when I'd totally forgotten that I had put this in place, but I have it notify me when I'm below a certain amount of free RAM, so that I can be like, oh, okay. Like, I also have it notify me if the CPU is high for more than 60 seconds or something.
Oh.
Right, because sometimes that's intentional. Like, I'm doing a thing and it's crunching and I want to use that's great. But sometimes an app runs away and you don't, unless you're obsessively looking, you wouldn't know. And it's like, no, I want to know. Tell me if things are cooking. And if I see that alert because I'm running like some, handbrake process or something like that, well, that's great. No problem. Like, yeah, okay, good. Yep. All's well that ends well.
Yeah, I may do that because every once in a while, the fans will spin up on my MacBook Pro and I don't know why.
Right.
Well, sometimes I'll look in the process list and something, is just going crazy.
It's going nuts. Yeah, exactly.
That they didn't expect.
Yeah.
So that's what I got for that.
I like it. That's great. No, that's a good one. Yeah. App Tamer is another thing that can help maintain CPU constraints on an app. I don't think it'll do anything with I can't remember if it does anything with RAM usage. I don't think so. I think it's just helping to limit CPU usage. And you can say, you know, only limit the CPU usage if this app is using more than, say, 10% of the CPU or 30%, you know, whatever you want to set it to on a per app basis. And you can even say only do this if the app is hidden. You know, like there's all kinds. I love App Tamer. It's great for those kinds of things. And then finally, for your issue, John, I can't. Yeah, Turbo Boost switcher is one of my favorite things, because now what I do is I have it set. I have the Pro version because you can set some automations, and one of the automations you can set is when your fan is higher than you know, a certain amount of RPMs for a certain amount of time. So I say if mine's above 2,000 RPM for more than 30 seconds, or maybe it's 60 seconds, now engage Turbo Boost, like, or disengage Turbo Boost, and that will almost always bring it down. Now, again, there's times where I want to let it, you know, kind of run rampant, and I can just turn that off. But it's nice to just have it like, no, we'll throttle it back, you know, which is most of the time what I prefer, because I don't like my computer to sound like a, you know, jet engine blasting off.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. We got any more like that? This seems to be the question that just keeps on giving. Yeah. All right.
I think we're good.
Okay, cool. Drew asks us about, well, he says, we're entering the mesh category here, or, well, routers in general, not just mesh. He says, but I was wondering about a new setting that I have seen in eero called Optimize for Conferencing and Gaming. He says, I'm wondering if you guys have an opinion on the utility of this setting. I have a situation where I have a pretty good connection, 900 megabits per second down, 35 megabits per second up in my house, but a much weaker connection in the in-law flat in my backyard, where I often do my Zoom and Skype calls these days. He says, it's not clear to me if/how much of an effect that toggle might have. I tried testing, but there are so many variables, it's tough to be sure if there's any appreciable effect. He says, on the other hand, maybe that answers my question and it is negligible or only helps in rare edge cases. So eero has renamed one of their features. They used to have a feature called Smart Queue Management, right? And what this would do is, for us, it was what we call WAN-based QoS, or more appropriately, BufferBloat protection. BufferBloat being that thing where when all of your, or lots of your devices, or even just one device, is uploading a ton of data, it sort of slows everything else down because your upstream gets soaked, and most cable modems can't deal with that properly. So they've renamed this from Smart Queue Management to Optimized for Conferencing and Gaming. Near as I can tell, it is exactly the same feature with just a new name. So I don't think the functionality has appreciably changed, but that's, you know, that's what it is. Now, as to whether or not you need it, I have two answers. The first is that based on your speeds are the same as mine. So I'm assuming you are on a Comcast/Xfinity gigabit connection. And if you are, then you have a DOCSIS 3.1 cable modem by definition, and you don't have buffer bloat problems anyway. So this setting will make almost no difference for you. Don't need it. Now, to solve your problem, though, that sounds like a range issue. And so start thinking about, you know, I would do some speed tests, because and even ping tests to see if you're getting consistency, but you may need to move some things around in the house, or maybe add another access point so that you get a nice strong signal out to the makeshift office that you are now using for your Skype and Zoom calls. So that sounds like what that problem is. But anyway, what do you think, Mr. Braun?
I concur.
You concur. Excellent. All right. Roger brings us a question that sort of merges these two things. He says, I have a question about a message I received from Plume, the mesh company, concerning my Wi-Fi setup. He says, the message says, Plume has identified that my system has a second network name in my home that is the same name as my Plume network's Wi-Fi network, the SSID. He says, Plume recommends that I disable the Wi-Fi function on whatever that device is because it might interfere with Plume steering devices to the right pods in my house. Here's my issue. He says, I've definitely caused this problem. I used to do what they're recommending when I first installed the Plume pods. However, on several occasions when I was out of town, there would be a power outage that would cause the modem/router and the Plume pods to go offline. When the power was restored, the modem would come back, but the Plume pods would ultimately not function until I returned home, unplugged them from the wall, then plugged them back in. Needless to say, without Plume acting as a router, I was without security cameras, video doorbells, and access to my thermostat or anything else in my house. After several such incidents, I got the latest modem router from Xfinity, changed the name to my same SSID that Plume uses, and then plug the Plume pods back in. My theory, he says, is that the Xfinity modem router is powerful enough to reach at least half of my house where I have my security cameras, the video doorbell, and thermostats. He says if power goes out and the Plume pods don't come back, the devices that can still be accessed because the Xfinity is broadcasting the same SSID. So they just jump from one to the other. He says, so far it's worked flawlessly. Should I just ignore the Plume message or am I missing something? He says the Plume pods definitely make the signal stronger and allow the Wi-Fi to reach parts of the house that the modem will not. Okay, so I love this. This is very interesting. The Plume pods are great, by the way. They're definitely, up there with eero, in my opinion, in terms of like the meshes that I trust. I think right now in the house, I'm running the Plume pods for like the last week, and that's been pretty good. Anyway, we like interesting here, Roger. So thank you. Your current scenario will work. And from a safety net standpoint, I actually really like the creative solution that you came up with here. What you're missing is exactly what Plume tells you you're missing, the ability for Plume to truly manage your Wi-Fi, because it's generally speaking, it's up to the client devices to choose which access point they connect with. The router can only provide guidance, but Plume's guidance is arguably the best I've ever seen. They're really good at knowing like, oh, you should jump to this pod, and they do it right away. And they've profiled every device so that they know, okay, well, iPhones respond best when we nudge them to a new device this way. But that Samsung, Galaxy S8, that's weird. So we have to nudge that this way. And Plume's really good at that. And I've had like zero problems with that roaming or anything with Plume. And it's fast, like definitely the fastest I've ever seen. So you will potentially lose the benefit of this because your mesh isn't the only thing that your devices will be connecting to. Some of your devices may just choose to connect to the Wi-Fi in your router. And if your router, like at this point, actually, Plume is pretty smart. So if you have your router being a router, which you do, Plume will automatically set itself into bridge mode so that you're not having a double NAT scenario, that's good. And I also like that about Plume. But why from a Wi-Fi standpoint, this is not optimal. So I know this has been a problem with Plume in the past. They've done weird things. Like they used to just take the network down anytime the internet connection was cut off. And it was like, no, please don't do that. I have devices that want to talk with each other, even though we can't talk out to the internet. And so Plume fixed that for sure. They may have fixed the problem you're talking about. So it's worth testing this by simulating a power outage and then just, letting things come back on and see what happens. Generally, I think what you want to do to test that is make sure your Plume pods come back online before your router is on. And then that might answer your question here. But if it doesn't, then I kind of actually like the scenario you've put together here because it makes sure that your devices have something if you're not there to manually coax it back to life. So I don't know. What do you think, Mr. Braun?
It seems kind of weird that they're smart enough to know that there's someone that's not them out there and that it confuses their algorithm. I just don't get that.
Oh, okay. So it's a good,
because the thing is they know that there's a rogue, or as they see it, I guess.
No, that's what it is. It's a rogue access point, right? Yeah, trying to hijack.
It's not part of the club. Well, they know that because I guess they look at the MAC address, and they know if it's a Plume product or not. And if it's not in their range, then I guess that's when you get this message.
Or if it's not one of the, 4 Plume pods that are assigned to your account, like even if it's another Plume, like they could be like, no, like that's not part of this club. Yeah. But the problem is, as soon as you join the non-Plume device, so in this case, the Xfinity router, Plume, you lose all the benefits of Plume's routing. Your device might like try and hang on to that router connection longer than it should. You don't get the benefits of Plume's sort of Wi-Fi management, and you might start having signal strength issues with both if they're both competing for the same channel too. Like, there's the coordination that you get when you have a mesh is lost when you start introducing your own devices into the mix. It doesn't mean that that's the wrong thing to do. It just means that you're losing some of those benefits of mesh when you choose to do that. But, it's a compromise. So that's why you wouldn't want that. Yeah. Which is a good question, because it seems like, wait a minute, And in his scenario, it might be the absolutely right thing. So I don't know. All right. Should we go to Wilko here, John? How are we doing on time? Okay. Yeah, we're cranking along. Good. Wilko says, I am once again reminded of the importance of knowing what normal looks like. He says, but since Wi-Fi is one of your favorite subjects, I thought you might be able to help. He says, since yesterday, one of my TP-Link access points is showing the status disconnected. Resetting, power cycling, nothing seems to be able to bring it back in the family. Some observations, although I'm not sure whether or how they would be related. The router of my ISP, says, which is a Dutch company, is not showing in the access point in the client log of the various clients that are the DHCP clients that are listed. So, okay. He says the security log of the router shows an enormous amount of entries with SYN flood, most originating from my 2019 iMac. He says, but maybe this is normal. Maybe I don't need to worry about it. And then looking at Activity Monitor on my Mac, I saw MDNS responder is right at the top in terms of received bytes, with 60 megabytes sent and 185 megabytes received. Again, he says, I don't know what normal looks like. Disconnecting the TP-Link access point from the controller did not change anything. He says, now that I write this, I suspect the two subjects are unrelated, but I'm also at a bit of a loss as to how to proceed. Yeah, so as far as normal goes, MDNS responder is also my most popular network process too. A lot of things run through it. So it is normal, to have that. It absolutely will have lots of data run through it. SYN flood might be normal too. It's hard to know without a test. It's hard to know what your router sees as a problem big enough to choose to put it in its warning logs or debug log. Like, we don't know what log level the router is set to, so it might be okay. It might not. It sounds to me like your TP-Link access point has had some kind of failure, maybe even just a hardware failure. But I would do a full factory reset on it and see if you can, at that point, it should broadcast its own Wi-Fi signal so you can connect to it and configure it, as new on your network. That's what I would try and see if it works. So other than that, what do you think, John?
Yeah, it sounds like something rolled over.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah,
as far as SYN, I mean, that's a normal thing. Well, that could indicate trouble somewhere.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. All right. Let's go to Larry here. Larry allows us to zoom out a little bit. He says, I've installed WebRoot Secure via Carbonite and have had TunnelBear VPN as well. He says, do they perform some of the same functions? In attempting to restart Carbonite, it appears the new Mac operating system does not like it, a continuing problem. So basically we're asking, we zoom out a little bit, internet security packages like this WebRoot Secure, but there's many others out there, versus or as compared to a VPN. Are they both doing the same thing. And from a technical standpoint, no. A VPN is connecting you via a secure tunnel to another network, and that will make it so that it looks like, you're coming from there instead of your place. It also means that whatever network you're on, they can't sniff your packets and see even where you're connecting other than to a VPN, right? So it's this shielded tunnel. The internet security stuff usually is looking for inbound attacks, things that you've had, either installed or trying to install on your computer, or visiting a website that, you don't want to visit or you want to be protected against, those types of things. Now, they can also provide some encryption levels. So it's possible that there's some overlap between what a VPN and what any given web security platform might provide. But in general, no, they are two separate types of things. And if you want the features of both, then you should use both. Now, whether you need those features of a web security platform, that's a different conversation, which we can have. But to answer the question, they are two separate things. So any thoughts to add on this one, John?
I'm not too familiar with this product either, but yeah, they have. Yeah, they have one entry here that says secures your smartphones and tablets with a couple of asterisks, which I don't know what that means.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, yep, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think they're redundant. Yeah, it does some useful stuff, but it sounds like VPN is not one of them. So
right.
Hopefully they get along.
All right. Let's move on to Dennis has something of interest here. Dennis says, my question is about the Synology RT2600 router. This router replaced my Airport Extreme, and I discovered it from your show. He says, I've been getting an email from my ISP, for him, Rogers, in Canada, telling me that there is a device that is showing signs of exploitable NetBIOS vulnerability. And they send a log file that says, and it even the machine name even says Synology router in it. And he's like, what can I do to stop this? He says it tends to happen occasionally, but not always. And he says, when I've tested for it, I'm not seeing it. So I don't know. He seems to think that it's a legitimate concern because it has the name Synology router right in there. So presumably it's, there is something broadcasting a, available NetBIOS port on it. Steve Gibson's Shields Up, he's at grc.com. That will pull your network for you and kind of look at things, which is a nice way to see what the outside world can see about your network. And of course, Steve really knows the security and he has built Shields Up to sort of detail, okay, here's what we found, here's why it matters. And then you can kind of get in there and solve some of those problems. The Synology router isn't just a router. It also but it's not the only router that can do this. It can do some file sharing. It can do some other things. And it sounds like the Windows file sharing is at least some of the time being exposed to the WAN port, not just the LAN port. And there are some settings in the Synology router where you can configure, in fact, exactly this. So we sent some of those to Dennis to turn off. But in general, that's what you're looking for in scenarios like this, where it's saying, hey, you're sharing files potentially with the outside world. Do you want to do that? Go into your router settings. I've seen this with some Netgear routers, and some of the more full-featured routers have their own file servers in them, and they can be your time machine destination or just your file sharing. It's pretty cool. But you want to make sure that when you turn on those features, that they're locked down to the things that you want them to be locked down to, and you got to pay attention there. I suppose is the lesson. So, thoughts, Mr. Braun? It's nice that Rogers does this for him, I think. Yeah,
I'd get on the horn to Synology and say, hey, what do you guys think about this?
Yeah, and you could ask Synology support too, of course, but and there's settings.
Why is that port open? I guess because BIOS. That's
Yeah, the port's open because he's probably checked the box that says open that port. Like, it's that with great power comes great responsibility scenario. The Synology is a pretty flexible router and you can do lots of different things with it, but you can also get yourself into a scenario where you've now configured it to do something that maybe you didn't want it to do. So you just got to be, go through those settings and make sure that you're not, broadcasting to the outside world. So, yeah. Cool. All right. We got to do Tim's. I almost put this in cool stuff found, John, but I didn't. So here it is. Because Tim asked us a question. He says, when I'm live streaming video, and I'm trying to figure out why our stream is not as pristine as possible. And so immediately this question resonated with me, John, because, we're doing the same thing, live streaming. He says our streaming provider always asks for a screenshot of Traceroute. And he says he attached a screenshot of that. And the instructions are always to have us using the terminal to run the Traceroute command for at least 10 minutes, which I thought was weird because Traceroute generally tends to run and then it's done. He says, and that produces some results where we can see over time if there are any problems in the connection. And then he said, but when I go into network utility on my Mac and run Traceroute, it gives similar but different results. Well, here's the thing about these two utilities is he's using a utility called MTR, which is my Traceroute. And it's not available by default on the Mac, but you can install it with Homebrew. So this is definitely a geeky one, but you can say brew install MTR. And then normally what a Traceroute does is you say Traceroute to say www.macobserver.com, right? And your computer figures out what route it's going to take across the internet to get there. And then it shows you that route. But what it shows you is 3 ping times for each stop in that route. So you can look and see, were there any problems getting to any of the hops there? And it can be a really helpful diagnostic tool. The thing is, some of those things that are hops are programmed to deprioritize ping returns, because if they're busy being routers, they definitely don't want to be busy being like ping hosts, especially if they're really popular routers. So you might see, like really low ping times and then one high one, or it, misses 2 out of the 3. And then the next one after it is fine. If the next one after it is fine, you don't actually have a problem, right? Because it's getting to the next one and we know what hop it's going through. So don't worry about it. But if you start to see that, it gets worse and cascades from one to the next, now okay, there's some problem between me and the host that I'm trying to get to. That's what Traceroute does. You can do it in network utility, and it's kind of a fun thing. Again, to know what normal looks like, I highly recommend just going and spending some time playing in there. Then, if you want to go up a notch, install this MTR thing, because MTR runs a Traceroute continually, John. And it shows you like average ping, best ping, packet loss, right? Because now it can calculate a packet loss percentage based on over time. And again, you're going to interpret the results the same way. If there's one in the middle that's showing, 15% packet loss, but then the one below it is like 0 or, point something, well, don't sweat it. But, gives you some information. And it just runs until you stop it. So I have a new fun utility to use, John, because I've never heard about MTR before. And until I saw Tim's screenshot, because Tim thought he was just running Traceroute from the terminal. But no. Tim was running a special version that presumably his streaming provider sent to him. So pretty cool. What do you think, John? Have you messed with MTR yet?
No, I'll have to install it with my favorite package manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, haven't really had a need to do a Traceroute as of late.
It's not, I don't find it to be the most helpful of the network troubleshooting utilities. I mean, again, it tells you what it tells you, but the ping times to the interim devices, say between me and you, are irrelevant. If my pings to you are good, I don't care what's happening in the middle. Like, doesn't matter. It's like, we're good. So that's kind of why I don't start with Traceroute. But, if I'm seeing
the other thing I've noticed is sometimes devices along the chain won't respond, and then it just gets stuck.
Right. Well, it'll get stuck for a little bit because it'll try the 3 for that one, and then it jumps to the next one. But you're right. At some point, like some devices just won't respond to pings. Some web servers, I think, in fact, we might even have the Mac Observer web server set not to respond to pings. I think that's how our admins set it up. So like it'll respond to web requests. So should be good. But yeah, it might be. I forget now. We've changed so many things with it. But anyway. All right, we got time for one more on the Wi-Fi front here. Robert writes, he says, I wanted to share a tip on solving a Wi-Fi problem that was driving me crazy. My AT&T Uverse connection comes in at the front right corner of my house. My home office is in the basement in the rear left corner of the house. To fix the understandably pitiful Wi-Fi signal in my basement, I ran some Ethernet cable down to my office with a Netgear Wi-Fi access point on the other end. I have 3 iPads, a 4th edition mini, a 10.5-inch Pro, and a 12-inch Pro, plus my iPhone 10 Max or whatever it's called. He says ever since iOS 13 was released, my iDevices get amnesia when it comes to my Wi-Fi passwords. It doesn't matter which Wi-Fi spot I'm hooking up to, upstairs or down in my basement. Additionally, this only occurs with my iDevices. It does not affect any of my other computers, which run Catalina, Windows 10, Linux, etc. And it doesn't affect my non-Apple tablets and phones. He says it's not every time, but perhaps once or twice a week, one of the iDevices will pop up an error telling me invalid password when connecting. I can copy paste the password in from LastPass, type it in, or autofill it from the keychain, all to no avail. It will keep telling me invalid password. I finally figured out how to easily solve the problem. I simply tap the top of the Wi-Fi settings to turn Wi-Fi off, then turn it back on, and now it connects right up with no issues or complaints. Doesn't even ask me for the password, he says. So he says, I thought I'd pass this along. And yeah, I've seen this, and I agree that it became more frequent with iOS 13. This is usually, as you're finding, not a sign of iOS having forgotten the password. It's a sign of the device being unable to negotiate a connection strong enough to pass credentials back and forth. And by turning Wi-Fi off and on, you're essentially allowing your phone to stop trying to retain its connection and, in fact, just start a new one from scratch where it looks and finds the best possible signal. So it sounds like, as we dig in here, maybe iOS 13 changed some tolerances where iOS would try harder to maintain its original connection before roaming. And without a mesh system where it's telling it to roam, you could run into some problems like this. So, yeah, interesting. I'm wondering, John, as we're going through this, if Robert is using the same SSID on the AT&T Uverse thing that he is on the Netgear extender, or if he's using separate SSIDs, because it sounds like he's using separate ones because he can pick which of the two he wants to connect to, and that would only be possible with separate SSIDs. But that might be the reason that it's like having trouble. If you put them all on the same SSID and let your devices choose, this problem might get solved, because then they would jump to the right one, because otherwise they're trying to hold on to one network and not jump to the other. I don't know. It's, these are weird problems to solve over the remotely. So what do you think, John?
The only thing that I've had this happen on occasion. So one observation is that it's all the Apple stuff that seems to be having a problem, or iDevices. Sure. Sometimes I've run into this, even on Mac OS. Sometimes it'll come up and ask for a password, and I'm like, well, why are you asking me for this? It's in the. Sometimes the keychain gets confused.
Oh.
So sometimes I found actually deleting the entry in the keychain for a particular SSID. We had someone that had a problem like this a while ago, and this solved it. Sometimes you'll see multiple entries for the same.
That's true.
SSID, and I've seen that, and I think sometimes iOS and even Mac OS get confused, and they pick the wrong one, and then you keep getting this, invalid password.
Right. So yeah, to fix that, if that's the problem, to fix that on your iOS devices, you'd have to go. I don't think telling them to forget the network is enough, but it might be. But I would go into Keychain Access on your Mac, remove those entries, and then let them be auto-created the one time you connect to that access point, and then that'll get synced over iCloud to your iOS devices. So, yeah. Interesting. See, we keep this stuff fun, but, like all good things, John, our fun must come to an end here because, well, it's just how it works. And we don't, we don't have unlimited time together. We have nice time together. So quality over quantity, although I feel like, with our 45-minute show that we started 15 years ago that has now stretched into an hour and a half, like that's not too bad. Double the pleasure, double the fun. Double the info. That's why we had to move from 3 new things to 5 new things when 2019 started. So, yes. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Go find a friend and tell them about the show. Like, email them, text them, whatever. We would love that. That would be awesome if you would do that. John, do you have anything to share? Places to contact us? Anything you like?
I should tell our local Nextdoor group. Boy, everybody's complaining about their internet connection.
Tell them to listen to Mac Geek Gab. That's helpful.
And it's rock solid. I've had rock solid. I'm very happy with Optimum. I can count the number of times on one hand that there's been a major outage that I could detect.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
There's a lot of people, they're like, oh my gosh, my connection drops like multiple times a day. I'm like, that's not right.
Yeah, not if they're in your same neighborhood. No, it's probably, it could be like, I think we talked about it on the show at the beginning of quarantine. My neighbor across the street was having a problem. And I was like, okay, well, and it was past his cable modem because I had put a new cable modem over there right before we all had to kind of lock down. And that didn't solve it. And I was like, okay, well, then, call Comcast. And sure enough, they came out. And we checked his number. Oh, I think we talked about it. We checked his numbers on the cable modem. It was like negative 40 or something power level. Like, yeah, dude. But barring that, yeah, you're right. It's usually your Wi-Fi. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And I replied to one the other day. I'm like, you know what? Get an eero.
Yeah.
Or a mesh system.
Some kind of mesh.
Problem.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so totally true. All right. Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. Thanks for sending in all your questions. You can call us, at 224-888-GEEK, which, John, is
4335.
That is correct, as far as I remember. We'd love to hear from you. Or you can go download the Mac Geek Gab app, and you can send us audio comments that way. I think that's how we got the one that was in the show today. So, it's it all works. Of course, I want to thank our sponsors that we mentioned in the show. Of course, burrow.com/MGG. Check that out. Barebones.com, mac.cachefly.com. And check out our other sponsors, too, at macgeekgab.com/sponsors, because we keep the deals all up to date for you there, so you can find deals from people like eero and Smile and OWC and Linode and those sorts of things. They're all right there. Even past sponsors that aren't sponsors, but the deals are still alive, so you benefit. I don't know. You benefit, Sean. You benefit. Do you have anything? Oh, no, other way. It's I'm on the other side of your mic. That's how I do it. Like when I'm looking in the video here, I have to look at where you are in relation to my microphone, and then I know where to point. So that's like a visual frame of reference for those of you that are watching. Remember that you can watch and you can have fun. You can listen. We, other than these little moments, we really try to keep it audio focused. And because it's important when we're doing things like this to for everybody to benefit, nobody to feel left out. And, that's how we work on making sure we don't get caught.
Made on Mac.
All right.